Designer toys first started showing up in Hong Kong and Japan in the early to mid to late 90s. People like Bounty Hunter in Tokyo and Michael Lau in Hong Kong started making independently produced toys that weren't for children. They were more like works of art.
The first toy that we did at Toy Tokyo, just to get something going, was a toy we did with Scene. Scene is a famous graffiti artist. They call him the godfather of graffiti. We were the first ones to do something in that vinyl urban movement.
In America, what we started to see happening was kind of like a strange circular motion where Michael Lau and these artists in Hong Kong were making toys that looked unlike anything else. They had style and they had flavor and they had Adidas on, and a lot of the toys looked like the collectors. You know, and that was one of the newest things about these toys, is that the younger population of the cities related to them and understood. It was like, this is me, but as a toy.
The first people that were doing stuff here were graffiti artists. And then later, I think they figured out to start using these pop surrealist artists, because they actually create these kind of weird fantasy surrealist paintings that have specific characters in them, and that you could pull these characters out and they made great toys.
I've always been drawn to character-oriented artwork, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew I interned on Futurama during college, and that even, you know, exposed me more to like character development and, you know, learning how to make a turnaround of a character and what really goes into, like, you know, fully creating this creature. I knew that the next level after, you know, two-dimensionally, that, you know, three-dimensionally, that would be the next level and the next step for me to see, you know, my characters actualized into tangible objects.
It was mostly hip-hop culture that they were showing in their art in these toys. Tattoos and Kangol hats and all this flavor is very tied to hip-hop music. So once that started coming over to the United States, you start to see the artists that inspired Michael Lau and the Hong Kong designers in the first place, the American graffiti artists who started the b-boy hip-hop style, starting to be influenced by people that were influenced by them. So then you have people like Scene and Doze Green and Futura all making toys as well. So I think it was a very cool thing how it kind of came full circle, and then the people that originated this hip-hop style were also contributing to making toys.
You know, the way I looked at it, these weren't just toys. These, you know, somebody sculpted these toys. These were sculptures, and they were sculptures that were available to the masses. So, you know, I think they transcended being just, you know, toys for kids. You know, they were in their own way. They were art.
Most toys in general are created by corporations that have marketing departments and research that are producing items for sale, for profit. If what you call designer toys, urban vinyl toys, they're created by artists that are making a statement.
A few years back, I have a character called MC Supersized, who, to me, I just was thinking he was Ronald McDonald, but what would Ronald look like if he actually ate at McDonald's?
The most important thing is that there's an artist's identity attached to it. So if you buy a G.I. Joe toy, the only name on it is Hasbro. But if you buy any one of these toys from Kid Robot, there's a real person behind it and an artist's name on the toy. And that is one of the biggest differences and the most important things about it. The idea, it's called a platform toy. So it's basically a platform for other artists. So the toy is a simple shape, and other artists bring their art and identity to it. When making toys, normally it'll get sculpted in wax, and then we'll have a sample made in vinyl. So this is a blank done. This is an early prototype. A good example of what are called control drawings, and these kinds of detailed drawings are what we'd send to the factory, and they would basically use these drawings to sculpt the toy in clay.
So with my new minifigure set that's coming out next month, you know, I did all the drawings for it, and then I hired this guy who does a lot of stuff with Kid Robot to do the stuff in Illustrator, because I'm kind of horrible at it and it takes me so long. And so he just went over my drawings, but I felt like, well, you know, why not let someone who is good at what they do it? And it's kind of hard as an artist to relinquish that power to someone else, but you have to trust, you know, in them that they can, you know, do their job just as good as you do yours.
And so what I did is I had a designer come do a mock-up of what the shoe should look like in Illustrator and what the Pantone color should be to give it to the toy person, and then they'd make the toy.
Through a process that lasts about a month, hopefully you'll get the sculpt finished and perfect. They'll send it to you, and then once you approve it in person, then you're good to go. And it's a pretty exciting process, and I think the best part of it is seeing the sculpt in person for the first time.
Then you got this little guy. He's my newest little baby that's been out, and he's a shoo-shoo. And if you look at my paintings from the exhibition, again, in my surreal world, I had a show called, an exhibition called Hide and Seek in the Forest of Shoo-shoo. And he was made by Ishii at Inuyello in Tokyo, and only 100 of these. And he would take all the girls' negative energy and hate, and he would absorb it, and then he'd ooze it out of his belly button as creamy, gooey love. You know? So they're all kind of like very sweet, very dirty, playful, really cute.
Regular toys are made for children, and they have to appeal to children, you know. And designer toys are made for adults, so you can do things that you could never do, you know, for children.
That's what I did with this character, Billy Bananas. So at first glance, he looks super cute, almost like a Mickey Mouse kind of guy, but he's actually holding his banana and a little axe behind his back.
The designer vinyl are fetish items. They're like, you know, they're meant to look like, sort of be like fine art pieces, but I don't necessarily know that they always, they're not marketed that way, but for me, I don't necessarily know that they always sort of achieve that.
The consumers are hard to predict. I've been doing toy signings. I had people from 14 to 40 years old, you know, at the same signing. I had a guy come up to me waiting in line and gave me a bag of weed, and then 10 people behind him were 2 police detectives that said, "Tristan, keep up the good work, I love your dunnies," and they gave me a police card at the same signing. So, you know, it's really hard to say.
The consumers seem like they're young, you know, hipsters, designers. The consumers are us, you know, other people in the arts community.
Well, it seems like a lot of the designer toy stuff is actually more of an older fan base than it is younger, which is kind of surprising, but then like if you're in the community long enough, it's kind of like not, because some of the stuff is really expensive, and it is art, so I guess you're going to have older artsy kind of types collecting it, stuff like that.
There's a collector mentality where they always have to be collecting something, and usually they go from one thing to the next. And if these guys were collecting vinyl toys now they're collecting silkscreen prints by street artists, or, you know, whatever. They always just jump around. Somebody else figures out, hey, we can sell these people, let's make more stuff for them to buy. Because there's this need to collect on certain kind of people to sort of, I think, define who they are in a way. So there's always going to be, you know, there's always going to be people out there to collect, but sometimes they just cycle through something. And after a couple of years, they're like, I'm over this toy thing. They lose interest in it.
You're 28, you're collecting toys still, but I'm like, this is my hobby. I mean, you have your own hobby, I have my own, I like my toys. So for me to go like wait outside the iPod store and wait for the new iPod to come out, that would be insane to me. And, you know, I can wait 2 weeks later and get the same iPod. But if a toy comes out, that's the one-time only toy. People collect bongs, people collect porno. It just depends. You know, a lot more people collect toys, I guess, now.
Safer hobby.
Yeah.
If you go to see an exhibition of Doe's Green or Tim Biscup even, the only thing you could take home is maybe a poster, and you can't afford the $10,000 painting. And that's the way it's always been. And that's, you know, excluded a lot of people, excluded a lot of the fans. And what we're seeing now is this really nice, happy medium where you can own a piece of art, but it's only $50 to $100, sometimes cheaper, and it's still limited edition, still has value, and it's still a legitimate part of that artist's landscape of work. And that's like a really populist way to look at it. It's very cool.
you know, the designer vinyl has really been fetish. It's like a fetish item, and sometimes I just don't think it's as good as the people are trying to make it out to be. It's limited edition. It's a marketing ploy. There's only so many pieces of crap that you can buy, but it's a piece of crap, and I know people have done this. They've made designer crap, because it is crap. I don't know who did it. Some artist did it, and like you've got it in 5 different colorways, and there's only 300 of each. It's a marketing ploy. It doesn't mean it's good. It's just a way to get people to buy. Simple as that.
Well, for most artists, I mean, even if, you know, they're graffiti artists and they're famous for doing trains, I think most artists want to work in every medium possible, you know, because you have certain ideas that are best expressed, you know, outside on large scale, but then when you take that same graffiti painting and then put it onto a canvas, sometimes it looks kind of hokey, you know, so then he has to reinvent himself to be on a canvas, or reinvent himself to have a toy. But it's also great because it gives us collectors a way to take it home and own it, you know. Also, like when you're buying things from an artist, you're supporting that artist, and you're voting for that artist. And at some point, a lot of people, you know, quit being artists. So they quit being artists because there's not enough support.
You know, with the rise in popularity of designer toys, artists have launched their careers off of it. You know, there are artists that you never would have heard of if they didn't have a toy that came out that was so popular. So that's a great bonus. You know, anything that allows artists to be independent and give them a vehicle to show their work is amazing.
I think that people feel very separated from art. It's in these museums, and I think people inherently know that they're not involved in deciding who gets to be the famous artist, who gets to, you know, be the cultural icon. That there's a very few people that are deciding that, and this creates a culture where they actually get a vote and they get to decide, and they get to pick the artists they like and support them.
So like the vinyl scene now is kind of just starting to come out of the woodwork and stuff, and it's starting to gain popularity. So I think it's kind of a given. You just got to put that in there because it's now like a part of pop culture.
A number of designer toys on sale at Christie's and Phillips de Pury, the Modern Art Auction House, and Dunny and Money in MoMA, as well as the Smithsonian. So you see a lot of big established institutions taking notice and giving it a good kind of endorsement, I guess. But you know, from now on, it's really up to the people making the toys to decide if they're going to run it into the ground or keep doing, you know, new important things that are breaking boundaries and taking risks. So we'll see.